One of our favorite people, former general manager of the Saints and the Dolphins, is Randy Mueller, and he's among his many media things that he's doing. He's working with Heavy.com, and I was a little caught off guard, but I understand the concept, and we'll talk more about it. As he said, look, the Ravens should be thinking about drafting a quarterback, and perhaps as early as like the second round of this draft. Let's discuss it now with one of the people we like the most around here. He is, of course, the aforementioned Randy Mueller, and he's with us now on Glenn Clark Radio. Randy, it's Glenn and Paul in Baltimore. Ooh, it's great to chat with you as always, sir. Thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes for us this morning. Randy, sorry about that. Everything all right? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me back on.
It's great to hear from you. So, the Baltimore Ravens should think about drafting a quarterback. I know the answer, but I'm going to let you explain it again. Why?
Well, here's my thinking, and let me just say this. Nobody's trying to replace Lamar Jackson. That's not the idea. That's not the theory in what I'm talking about. I just know this, having sat in the GM chair for many years, I made my worst deals. I think most GMs would concur with their own plights when you don't have options, when you have to make a deal for X amount of dollars that you're nervous about making. I just think the league, that team building, that taking care of your own team is best served when you have options. So my thought was that if they can find a way to have a consensus in their own building on an option at quarterback, and again, I'm not talking about taking one early, but round 2 or 3 may just be the right time this year to take one. I think it makes some sense to them. I think it gives them some leeway. Hey, nobody can force Lamar to sign a contract. If he is not willing to, like what we hear and read,
Right,
that he's not ready to do that, you've just got to look out for your own franchise. And I think this does that. It just gives you an option. One, might help you in negotiating, but two, it's just going to help your team move forward a little bit with an option that doesn't exist currently.
I feel like we're in this weird place, Randy, where like that to me is the most important answer here. Is it really if if it really is that Lamar Jackson is hell bent on doing the 2 years of franchise tags and into free agency thing, then I'm probably with you, right? Like you can't allow him to hold up your entire organization in the process. If for whatever weird reason, like there's another report that came out last week from Mike Florio that was like, no, he just wants to wait until next year, which I don't understand at all. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. But if that's the case, then I don't think you use a draft pick on a position where you're getting somebody that's not going to play. I think it's too early to go that route. But I do think this really has to come down to, do the Ravens have a true answer, a true feeling as to whether or not Lamar Jackson is willing to sign before we get to this 7-year place and the 2 franchise tags?
I hear you. I think we're kind of drinking the same Kool-Aid,
Yep.
but at the same time, I just can't let his wishes control the rest of our team and what we're doing. So I can appreciate that. I think timing is everything. I don't think the Ravens can risk a decision from him not coming until a year out. Plus, the other thing is, I just think at some point the Ravens need to advance beyond where they're at right now. And I don't know how that works, but it either means they have to get better play at quarterback from the pocket, or they have to build out the rest of the team better around Lamar. That decision has been staring them in the face for 2 or 3 years now, and it just seems like they're stuck in neutral. So they've got to do something one way or another, and I've always been one to be a little bit proactive. I think the investment you make in another quarterback, he's given you a window to do that right now. You don't even have to explain yourself. It's not a slight against him at all. You're just covering yourself. And I think the investment you make in another quarterback, let's just say it's in round 2 or 3, it's always going to be there if you pick the right guy to redeem the compensation. If you have 2 guys, that's never a problem, and you can always move somebody at the end of the day, whether it's next year or the year after. I just don't like the idea of teams being dictated to, and I think there's a way to at least figure out an end to it if you give yourself some options.
Okay, so I hear everything you're saying, but at the end of the day, doesn't ultimately Lamar Jackson still have all of the leverage, Randy? Like this is the part that's kind of puzzling to me as to what it is that Lamar Jackson's trying to do. The argument about trying to get the free agency, right? This is when you can capitalize the most. Well, we just watched Deshaun Watson, who was not a free agent, get a fully guaranteed contract because teams are desperate for quarterbacks, and there's always another team that's out there that's willing to give you a contract. So I have no idea why you're waiting that long and trading off not getting more money right now. Like, why choose to play for $24 million this year when you can demand more money now? And we see how the quarterback position is going. You're gonna be able to demand more money in 3 years if contracts have shifted that much at that point. I still just feel like at the end of the day, the fear of not having a quarterback, even saying, hey, we like this guy, we're going to draft him, you don't know if you got Sam Darnold. I just feel like the fear of not having a quarterback will continue to drive the leverage towards the Lamar Jacksons, the guys that we do identify as being top-tier NFL quarterbacks eternally.
Well, I think it's all valid. I totally agree with you. And again, I'm not trying to replace him, but I am trying to give us an option or a fallback that might give us a little shot in the arm as a pocket passer as well. That's all. I just think at some point, if Lamar chooses this route, it's going to be Kirk Cousins reincarnated. I don't know that Lamar is a top 5 quarterback in the league, but he is in the eyes of the Ravens and what they want to do. So therein lies the rub. Do you pay this guy $45 to $50 million a year, or do you give yourself options like other teams have done recently where they're moving people to relieve cap pressure and build out their team in how they want? It's a tough question, and that's why GMs are in the chairs they're in now. You just can't make everybody happy. You got to make some tough calls, and we'll see how Eric handles this. I've had a lot of respect for him over the years. I think he'll do the right thing. But it would be hard for me to just sit on my hands and let this thing play out without giving some protection to the rest of my organization.
So I feel like, and it's funny. I guess, by the way, we're chatting with Randy Mueller, who's with us here on Glenn Clark Radio. I guess our Rolodex is a lot of Dolphins GMs because we had Tannenbaum on last week. And I ran this by him, and I said, at what point do you start thinking about a trade? And his response was, you don't. You let it play out, and you go try to win a Super Bowl because you got Lamar Jackson. And you sort of identify. We watched what the Rams, what the Buccaneers have done in recent years, and sort of just saying, look, we're all in for right now. And you go that route with Lamar Jackson over these next few years, and you say, we're going to use these years to try to win a Super Bowl, and if we do, we do. If we don't, we don't. Would you at some point, again, if Lamar Jackson really is playing the game of I want to go 2 franchise tags and I want to get the true free agency, is there a point at which you would say, no, we absolutely must consider making a trade. We must consider what it is that we could get for this asset?
Yes, I agree 100%. I agree with what Mike said. I wouldn't look to trade him now. That's not the point of my, thinking. I just think at some point, yes, you draw the line. You see teams do it around the league now. We saw it in Kansas City with Tyreek Hill. They drew a line. Eventually, they crossed it with their negotiating and just said, we're better off going a different direction. Same with Devontae Adams in Green Bay. Now, I know those are non-quarterbacks and a different deal, but there's a price that everybody chokes on. And if it means that at the detriment of the rest of your team, great. But right now, the last time I checked, the Ravens haven't got to where everybody wants to get yet. I understand the love for Lamar. I think he's a really good player too, but they've got to get over the hump at some point, and they've been all in the last few years. If you're not all in and haven't been all in, you're doing everybody a disservice. So I don't think that's a change of heart to go all in. They've been all in.
I understand. I guess it's more the idea that you just say, hey, we'll worry about this when we need to worry about it, right? We're just not going to think about the assets expiring. We will be singularly focused on one goal, and that's the goal of winning right now. Let me go the other way. Steve Bisciotti at the owners' meetings last week was asked about the Deshaun Watson situation and said, I don't think that's necessarily a game that we have to play. Is he right that this could be somehow an anomaly among quarterback contracts, or is this just reality now? Like, there's just nothing that teams are going to be able to do about it. Once one player got a fully guaranteed contract, the next guy that's up is going to demand that because there's always going to be a team that's willing to give it to him because there's always – I keep coming back to it. There's always a quarterback-desperate team that we can say, hey, the Browns were desperate, sure, but why wouldn't the Panthers be desperate right now? Why wouldn't the Falcons be desperate? Why wouldn't – it just seems to me like there's always a quarterback-desperate team, and it feels like that's going to drive this to be the standard moving forward.
Well, I think it's a little different in Deshaun's case because for all intent purposes, he was a free agent. I don't think you'll see another one like this where he's actually free and can make choices. And that's why the Browns did what they did. They did it for the reason of having to commit to get him on board, to acquire the player. these other teams that end up signing their players, it's going to cost them capital, no doubt. It's going to cost them some in guarantees, but I don't think you'll have to commit to a fully guaranteed deal. But it's all about options. If you have no options, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I know owners are ticked about the Cleveland deal, no doubt about it. I know GMs are ticked about it as well. Time will tell. I know that everybody's going to try to get it, but look at the other side of it too. If I'm an agent representing Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, who's next up at some point, if I don't get a fully guaranteed deal, I'm probably getting fired too. So I'm not sure it's right for either side, to be honest with you.
I mean, but that's the weird part. And I just feel like the first owner that tries to say, "Look, we're backing. We are not doing this. We are backing off." Then that player just walks in and says, okay, well, they wouldn't do that in Washington, right? Like, so you can go ahead and move me to Washington right now. And I don't know what the recourse is. I feel like we're trending more towards what we've seen when it comes to quarterbacks, right, Randy?
Yeah.
I think we're trending towards what we've seen in the NBA, which is if you're one of the top 20 players, you have the right to print money every year to decide where you want to be and at what price based on where the cap goes. Just because you have that type of leverage. These teams have to have those players or they have nobody coming out to their games.
Well, it's definitely made it harder for clubs, there's no doubt, and that's why they're ticked about it. It's made it harder for them to say no. The guarantee rules now where you have to fund the guarantees in an escrow account are a giant deal for a lot of the lower cash teams. And it's funny, both Cincinnati and the Chargers have been lower cash teams. I mean, the fact that the Browns at some point are going to have to write a check for $180 million here soon just to fund the Deshaun Watson deal, that's got owners ticked around the league as well. As we know, that those dynamics aren't easy for everybody to do. So time will tell. It's a fascinating topic that we've never had to deal with in the NFL before, and you might be right. We might be trending toward an NBA type setup.
All right, and you've got a name in mind for what if the Ravens are thinking about drafting a quarterback. You've got a name in mind, and it's not one of the top guys, but it's somebody that's kind of appealing to you. Tell me a little bit about Bailey Zappi.
Well, I think for my money, and I try to watch all these guys on tape before I even say anything about them, I'm just not enamored with any of the top guys beyond Kenny Pickett. I think he's more ready for the NFL. The other guys, to me, are all projects. I find that a guy like Bailey Zappi, who is accurate, he operates from the pocket, he's athletic enough, he makes all the throws and processes coverage. I just think he's a good prospect going forward, and I think he will succeed. I said in my column that if he was 2 inches taller, he'd be talked about in the same breath as Kenny Pickett because of the accuracy and everything else. So I like him. Again, everybody chooses something different. It's just my opinion. So I guess that's why Baskin-Robbins has 31 flavors, right? We all get our favorites, but I like Zappi, and I think he'd be a good setup for anybody, and it would not shock me if someone picked him toward the end of the first round or top of the second.
Before I let you go, Randy, the name that's sort of out there that might be available is DK Metcalf, the Seahawks wide receiver, and I would think if the Seahawks are planning to draft a quarterback, they would want to have wide receivers for their quarterback to throw to, but there's a price. Is DK Metcalf the type of guy to you that at his age is worth paying a big price for? I mean, we think about what the Tyreek Hill trade was. It was a late first-round pick and a second-round pick. It was a lot as far as the overall haul, but the top-heavy stuff was not overwhelming. Is DK Metcalf someone that if you're a team like the Ravens, and even though you kind of like the guys you have, you say, man, if this guy really might be available, that's the type of talent that maybe you do some crazy things for because you're getting a wild talent at a very young point in his career?
He is not for me. I'll be honest with
you.
I live in Seattle, so I've seen a lot of DK over the last couple of years. I don't think he's polished. I don't think he's a number one guy per se yet. I think he's a developing receiver, but he's not in the category of some of these other guys we're talking about. That's just my opinion. So, no, I would not mortgage the farm for somebody like him. I'm just shocked at the dialogue of every time a receiver now is looking for a new deal that he's got to be traded or they have to commit to $30 million a year. There's no happy medium anymore. So I'm not the biggest DK guy. I think, he's a nice piece, but I just don't see him as a frontline receiver now. There's a lot of inconsistencies in his play, including hands, including route running. just a lot of up and downs for me to commit that kind of money or compensation that you'd have to give to get him.
All right, Randy Mueller, in your media empire, what can I plug for you of the many, many things that you're doing these days?
Hey, I'm just trying to stay busy. I love to watch tape, and fortunately for me, a lot of people want to talk about what you see on film. So that's kind of the basis. I do a podcast on The Athletic. Comes out every Saturday morning called The Football GM. It's part of the football podcast show on The Athletic. And that's really what takes me into the film room more than anything else. You mentioned the heavy stuff that I'm doing a little writing for, and we do a lot of Facebook Live shows for heavy, and that's been a lot of fun. So those are the main places, and then I mess around on Twitter a little bit, but I'm far from an expert on any of it.
Oh, no, you certainly bring a lot of knowledge and information that we couldn't get elsewhere. At Randy Mueller _ is how you follow him, and MuellerFootball.com is his website. Randy Mueller, always appreciate taking the time for us. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, as always.
Appreciate it. Anytime.